What if Blue isn't Joni Mitchell's greatest album, just her most mythologized? I know, that sounds like heresy. Since 1971, Blue has been treated like sacred text. It's the emotional pinnacle of singer songwriters. It's on every greatest albums of all times list. It's the shorthand for Joni Mitchell. But here's the question I want to explore today. Has the story of Blue become more bigger than the music itself? When Joni Mitchell released Blue in 1971, it landed at a very specific cultural moment. The late 60s idealism was cracking. The singer songwriter movement was rising. Audiences were shifting from spectacle to intimacy, and Blue fit that mood perfectly. Sparse arrangements, piano, dulcimer, open tunings, and lyrics that felt uncomfortably personal. It was framed immediately as confessional, raw, exposed. And that framing stuck. Let's talk about the myth. Critics didn't just praise Blue, they canonized it. They described it as the most personal album ever made. They treated it like an emotional autobiography, like the audience was reading pages torn from Joni's personal diary. And culturally, that narrative is powerful. There's something compelling about the idea of an artist laying herself bare. Songs like River, uh, A Case of You, Little Green, they feel intimate, almost to the point of invasive, like you're overhearing something you weren't supposed to. But here's the subtle shift that happens over time. The narrative of vulnerability becomes the lens through which the entire album is understood. It's no longer just music, it's become a cultural symbol of emotional honesty. And once that happens, it's very hard to challenge. Now, here's where things get interesting. If we separate emotional impact from musical innovation, the conversation shifts. Because after Blue, Joni Mitchell didn't stand on her laurels. Look at Court and Spark, probably her most famous album. More complex arrangements, jazz influences, sophisticated chord sequences. It's tighter compositionally and more rhythmically adventurous. Then you get to the hissing of summer lawns. Now she's incorporating layered textures, nonlinear storytelling, and almost impressionistic structures. And then there's Hejira. That record is harmonically floating, minimalist but intricate. Jaco Pastorius's bass lines create this open, spacious architecture that feels miles away from the folk intimacy of Blue. If we're measuring artistic risk in terms of musical experimentation, structural daring, harmonic complexity, you could argue that her mid 70s work was far more radical. Blue is emotionally daring, but musically, it's still very much rooted in traditional singer songwriter structure. Here's something we don't talk about enough. Canon formation isn't just about quality, it's about narrative clarity. Blue tells a very clear story: heartbreak, self examination, romantic disillusionment. It's emotionally legible. It fits right into the cultural archetype of the vulnerable artist. Albums like Hejira don't do that. Hejira is detached, philosophical, abstract. It's about movement, observation, solitude, not raw confession. That's harder to summarize in a magazine headline. So, culturally, Blue becomes the emblem, not necessarily because it's the most musically complex, but because it's the most narratively digestible. Think of it this way: Blue is the emotional cornerstone of Joni Mitchell's legend. But is it the summit? Artists evolve, they expand, they complicate their own language. If we freeze Joni Mitchell at the time of Blue, we risk flattening her legacy into confessional folk singer songwriter. But she didn't stay there. She moved into jazz phrasing, unusual tunings, rhythmic ambiguity, structural experimentation. By the mid 70s, she wasn't just writing songs about love and loss. She was composing atmospheric, harmonically adventurous landscapes. A lot of times, those kind of albums require more patience from listeners, which might be exactly why they aren't mythologized in the same way. Now, this is not me saying that Blue is overrated or denigrating it in any way. It's extraordinary. The songwriting is sharp, the emotional precision is undeniable. The vocal performances are controlled but piercing. But there's a difference between greatest album and most culturally symbolic album. Blue may represent the turning point, the moment Joni Mitchell fully stepped into herself as a writer. But her later albums probably represent her peak as a singer songwriter. Those are two different metrics. Why does this even matter? Because when we reduce artists to one canonical masterpiece, we unintentionally narrow their legacy. For newer listeners, Blue becomes the entry point and sometimes the exit point. They hear Blue and think, oh, okay, that's Joni Mitchell. But that's not her whole story. The arc from folk introspection to jazz influenced experimentation is one of the most fascinating musical evolutions in 20th century songwriting. And if we keep repeating the same album as the definitive statement, we risk missing that evolution. So maybe the real question isn't, is Blue great? It is. But the better question is, has Blue become so mythologized that we've stopped examining the rest of Joni Mitchell's catalog with equal seriousness? Because sometimes the album that defines an artist publicly isn't the album that defines them artistically. And that's not an insult, it's an invitation. If you had to choose, not the most famous Joni Mitchell album, but the one that reflects her artistic peak, would it still be Blue? Or would you argue for Court and Spark or Hejira? The Hissing of Summer Lawns? I'm genuinely curious as to where you land. Let me know in the comments. Joni Mitchell's career has influenced people like Taylor Swift, the current in girl of the moment, Lana Del Rey, Fiona Apple, Tori Amos, as well as so many more. So many musicians were chomping at the bit to work with her. She holds a very important legacy, and I think she's wonderful. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. I'm trying to build my channel, and I would really appreciate it. Let me know what your favorite Joni Mitchell tracks and Joni Mitchell LPs are in the comments. Thank you so much for watching again, and I will see you in the next one.